I'll now hand it over to Maya. Maya, all yours.
Thank you so much, and good morning, everyone. Very excited to be here and talk to all of you today. And like Nimisha mentioned, we're going to talk about designing the career of your dreams. And the reason that we're going to talk about it is because a lot of people seem to think that career advancement just happens. You just stay long enough at a job and you get promoted, or you get the next role that you want. And unfortunately, it doesn't always work that way. But the good news is that you can actually decide what you want to do, and you can achieve anything you want in your career. And I'm going to give you a few examples of how to actually do that today. But before we get started, let me tell you a little bit about myself beyond what you've already heard. I just kind of want to tell you about my story. But actually before that, housekeeping. Everything you're going to see today is actually part of a toolkit that I created. So you don't really need to take any notes. Everything is going to be explained over 12 pages of step-by-step guidelines on how to create this career roadmap. So feel free to kind of sit back, relax, enjoy the conversation. I'm more than happy to answer questions throughout this session to make it more interactive, whatever makes sense. Nimisha, let me know if that's okay. But just to tell you a little bit about me, I actually didn't start my career in marketing. I spent the first 7 years of my career as a travel agent. And it was just because I needed a job very early in my career. I took one. And I got really comfortable. So I just stuck around for almost 7 years, even though I wasn't extremely passionate about what I was doing, but I was kind of moving forward. I became a manager, and I got really comfortable. And then I eventually started doing my bachelor's, and I fell in love with marketing. I decided this should be what I do every single day, which meant I had to figure out how to build a career in marketing. And I had absolutely no idea what that meant. And at the time, this was a while back, marketing wasn't as segmented as it is today. You basically had a couple of options. You can be a marketing communications manager, or you could do advertising. And for me, that sounded really exciting. So I started digging, and I realized, you know what, there's actually one more thing I can do. I can do social media. And this was, again, like 2006, maybe 7, when Facebook, Twitter, they literally just launched. And I decided this is going to be my niche. This is what I'm going to do. So I started learning. I read every blog post, every tweet, every piece of information I could find about social media to educate myself. And then I actually started playing with the different platforms. So I opened a Facebook profile, a Twitter, and I just started, shouting to the world, which was completely empty at that time. But at least I learned how to use those tools. And after about a couple of months of doing that, I went back to the travel agency and I said, hey, you know what? I really like this social media thing, and I think it can help the company. Would you mind if I do that in my spare time? And they had absolutely no idea what I wanted. So they said, yeah, sure. If it's on your spare time, you can do whatever you want. And this is how I got my first social media hands-on experience. I just built a company page for the travel agency and started creating content. And after about 6 months of doing that, where I had a lot more confidence, when I already had a few results, that's when I started looking for a real social media job. And I found one. I found one with a very small company. They were only 5 people at the time, but they were doing PR and social media. And they were super innovative. They only worked with like tech startups. Everything was so exciting. So I left a very secure job after 7 years with a really nice salary, and basically took an entry-level job in marketing, because I just knew this is what I'm supposed to do with the rest of my career. So just kind of to open up this story and talk to you about creating your own opportunities, because basically that's what I did early on. And we'll talk about that example. So what are we going to talk about today? We're going to talk about how to actually create the career of your dream. And it starts by evaluating where you are right now. What are the skills that you have? What is the experience that you currently have? So you have a starting point when you want to evaluate how to get to where you want to go next. We're also going to figure out how can you even decide what you want to do next? How do you know what you want to do the next year, 5 years, 10 years? So we're going to go through a couple of exercises that are going to help you figure that out. And then we're going to analyze the gap between where you are right now and where you want to go to. And we're going to figure out what it takes to get there. And once we know that, it's all about execution. Once we identify what's missing, we're going to put together a plan on how to get that experience, how to learn those skills, and how to actually get yourself ready for the next role before you actually have it. So this is what we're going to talk about today. Let's dive right in. So as I mentioned, your career is your responsibility, no one else's. And look, I've been a manager for the last decade, and I love my team, and I would always try and help them become a better version of themselves, but I don't spend every single day thinking about them and their career. That's the sad truth. So it's really up to you to create your own opportunities and proactively build your career, because no one else will do it for you. And once you realize that, when you realize you have the power to create any career path you want, that's when it gets really interesting, because then the possibilities are endless. So let's jump right into what you can actually do. So about, I think it was 8 years ago now, I did the first exercise, the perfect picture, for the first time. And basically what the perfect picture means is that you need to imagine your life. For me, it was 10 years from now. Maybe for you, it's next year. You need to actually imagine what a day in your life would look like. So I would go somewhere quiet, put my headphones in so I have no distractions, close my eyes, and actually imagine where I want to be. So you start with, you wake up in the morning, what do you do? Where do you live? Who do you live with? And then you start looking at your morning routine. And then you imagine how you get to work. And then you kind of imagine what the office looks like and who you work with and what do you actually do throughout the day. You kind of create this movie in your head of the perfect day and what you want to do in your career. And some people find it, very inspiring. Some people really respond well to visualization. Some people not so much. So don't worry. If you don't like this, we have another exercise. So once you have that movie in your head, what you need to do is actually write down everything that you saw, because then we're going to extract the information from there and figure out what is this role that you kind of dreamt of. And for me, when I did that exercise, I imagined myself as a Silicon Valley CMO. So I would work for a startup, lead marketing here in San Francisco. I would have a team that I really like working with. I would have a podcast about marketing, and I will be kind of an influencer in my field. And I would have a house on the beach, and I would do yoga every day. This kind of was my perfect day in my head. Now, the time that I came up with that idea, I was not even living in the US. I was definitely not the CMO of a startup, didn't have a podcast, wasn't doing yoga. None of that existed whatsoever. But I had that vision and I turned it into goals. And although it took me 7 years, if you look at my life today, I pretty much have the perfect picture happening for me. So I live in San Francisco. I moved to the US. I led marketing. I was the VP of marketing for a fintech startup. I now do consulting for small companies, which means I get to do only the parts I love to do in marketing. I had my own podcast for 2 years, and now I have a new passion project. I wrote a book. And I still do yoga almost every single day. So I know it took 7 years and it sounds like a lot, but I think those were very ambitious goals. So it required some time. And this is just to show you whatever you put your mind to, you can achieve, no matter how big your dream is. If you want to be the CMO of a company, you can get there. It will take about a decade, but you can definitely get there. So dream big. Don't, try to limit yourself because you're earlier in your career. Have a great vision of what you want to do, and that would help guide you in your career roadmap. Now, if you don't think that's the way for you, we can definitely move into exercise number 2, where you get to create a mental model of your work experience. And what that means, super simple, you create a circle in the middle of a page and you write down your current role, whether it's a job, an internship, and you start outlining all of your responsibilities and the skills that you've already gained in your career. And you can include any role you had to date. And when you're done with that list, you're going to divide it into 2 parts. Everything that you really, really love doing and you want to do more of, and anything you didn't like, you didn't enjoy, and you do not want to have in your career. When you look at the list of the things you like, you're going to start thinking about things maybe you haven't experienced yet. Roles or responsibilities or skills you don't have, but you think you want to have. So let's say you haven't had the opportunity to lead a team yet and you think being a manager is something interesting, then you would put that on the list. And what you're going to do now, you're going to take a look at that list with all the different things you enjoy doing and the things you think you want to do, and you will try and turn them into a role. And the way to do that, I mean, if you've been in the industry for a while, you may be able to look at that list of qualifications and kind of immediately figure out, oh, that looks like product marketing or digital marketing or anything else. If you don't have the experience to do that yet, you're going to go to LinkedIn and you're going to start looking for the different keywords, different responsibilities and skills that you outlined. And what you're going to come up with are either job descriptions that actually include a lot of these keywords, or people who have a lot of these skills in their background. And that's going to help you get ideas for potential roles that include a lot of the things that you want to do. Now, if you don't really have any experience, if you're not sure where you want to go, and this is actually something I heard from a lot of undergrads, because marketing today is so segmented. I think there's like probably 20 to 25 different disciplines within marketing, and it's really hard to try and figure out where you fit. So what I would recommend that you do, which is super simple, but somehow I think a lot of people kind of skip that step. Just do a Google search for most common marketing roles. You're gonna get 5 to 10 lists that will include pretty much every marketing role that exists right now. And you can kind of browse through these descriptions, immediately eliminate anything that doesn't sound interesting to you. So at the end, you'll end up with, let's say, 3 to 5 different roles that sound really interesting to you. And when you have that, go and look for job descriptions for those specific roles. It's going to give you a lot more information about what's expected of you, what the day-to-day might look like, what are the skills that are required. And I think it's going to help you understand whether or not it's something that you want to do. So all of these exercises pretty much put us in the same place where you have 1 or 2 roles that sound interesting. You're not 100% sure, but you think they're going to make you happy and they're going to be relevant for your career. So what you do next, you're going to try and find professionals who are currently doing these roles. And here's why. Reading job descriptions, That's great. Reading information online, awesome. It's going to give you some basic level knowledge, but there's nothing like talking to someone who is actually doing the work, because they can tell you what it really feels like. What are the skills that they're using every single day? They can tell you what it took for them to actually get to that job. And they can give you a lot of tips that you're not going to find just by browsing online. And I know it's a little bit intimidating sometimes to reach out to people. But I think especially if you look for someone who is not too high up, you want someone who's actually doing the work right now. I think most people will find it very flattering that you want to spend time with them and talk to them to learn more about their career path, how they got to where they are, and what they're actually doing right now. One really important tip is that you should look for professionals who work for companies that you find interesting. And here's why. A lot of the marketing roles are going to be different depending on the type of company you work for. So doing product marketing at Microsoft and Google is not going to be the same as doing product marketing for a consumer goods company or a small startup. And it's not because it's not the same type of marketing, it just takes a little bit of a different form. So you want to make sure that you talk to people who are working for the same companies you want to work for. Otherwise, you may be surprised with the information that you get. And just to kind of help you out, and I mentioned this is going to be in the toolkit, so you're going to have the list of questions. The idea is to have a really nice conversation where you pull out information from your counterpart about, you know, what their career journey looks like, what did it take for them to get to their current role. Maybe they can tell you that, you know what, you don't actually need all of the different skills and requirements you outlined. If you have this one thing, you're going to get the job. And that's the kind of information that you're looking for. And you also want to know if this is something you enjoy doing. I mean, I thought earlier in my career that digital marketing is probably the most interesting thing in the world, and I'm going to love it. So I got a job in digital marketing. And about 6 months into the role, I realized I really hate digital marketing. I had to spend a lot of time with spreadsheets and so much time, you know, optimizing the Facebook and Google algorithm. And for me, it wasn't fun. I'm more of a creative. I prefer writing and creating content. And I spent almost 2 years at that job because it was a great company and I had a great team, but I didn't actually enjoy what I was doing. So if you get an opportunity to talk to someone who's doing it right now and get all this information up front, you're going to save yourself a lot of pain further down the road. Okay, so after all of that, hopefully you have one, maybe two roles that you're interested in. You know what are the requirements for that specific role, and you kind of have a feeling regarding what it would actually look like in real life. Great, now you have to kind of compare it to where you are right now, so you can understand what's the gap between what you have right now in terms of experience and skills and what you need to get that job. And the way to do it, and it's super tactical, we're gonna kind of move through it very quickly, is you create the list of skills and experience required for the job you want. And then you're gonna rank yourself. You're gonna give yourself a score between 0 and 10 for every single one of those requirements. So let's say one of the main requirements for the job is leadership skills. You need to be a manager. Now, if I've never been a manager before, I'm gonna give myself a 0. If I've been a manager, but only for a couple of months, I don't have a ton of experience, then maybe I would give myself 3 or 4. And you do that for every skill. And then you go back to the list, and anything that is rated below an 8, that's where you need to focus. Those are the skills, those are the experiences that you actually need to gain to get that role that you want. Okay. Any questions so far, by the way? I'm more than happy to turn this into a conversation. Okay.
If you guys have any questions, you can jump in or raise your hand, and Maya will be more than happy to answer your questions. If not, towards the end of the session, we'll open it for a Q&A session in case you guys want to park your questions towards the end. So if you have any question,
I can wait for the end if you want.
No, it's
you
fine.
can ask it now. Yeah.
Okay. What was the hardest thing about finding a job in the US? Because I think you said you were international. And what advice would you give?
Ooh, that's a tough one. Let's keep that one to the end just because it doesn't necessarily plug into what we're talking about right now, but I'll remember it. This will be probably the first question that we'll answer, okay?
Thanks.
Cool. Okay, so you know what your next role needs to be. You know where you are right now, and you know what it takes to get there. You identified your own gaps and what you're missing right now. But now comes the hard part. Now you actually need to gain that experience or learn those skills. And I think this is where a lot of the people kind of miss out on opportunity because they don't realize they can actually create any experience they need, even if they don't have a job. We're going to go through a couple of these ideas. So first and foremost, this is super easy. You can just learn on your own. There's so much information out there today. You can take an online class, you can go to YouTube, you can follow an influencer, you can read a book. There's so much you can do on your own. And that's great, but that's still just knowledge. And knowledge is not the same as experience because that's application of knowledge. So it's great to give yourself a head start by educating yourself, but that probably won't get you the job because even if you can tell me, hey, I completed an online course about advertising, that's great. You have a certificate, but that doesn't mean you're good at what you do. And in order to get that job, you need to show experience. So what you can do next is actually volunteer and work for free. Now, a lot of people, for some reason, think there's something demeaning in doing work for free, but I actually think it's one of the best ways to gain experience. And just to kind of let you know, I started consulting about 2 years ago, and the first 2 projects I did were 100% free because I needed to start that client base and I needed to get testimonials and I just needed to actually feel and understand what it means to work as a consultant because I haven't done that before. So I gave a lot of time for free so I can gain that experience, I can have that customer base, and I can grow from there. So I don't think it's ever too late or it doesn't make sense to volunteer, and you can find, you know, a small business in your neighborhood or talk to friends and family and see if anyone needs help, because it will give you not only a purpose, but you will have an opportunity to actually apply the knowledge that you acquired. And that's the most important thing. And I can't obviously say that for every hiring manager out there, but for me, it doesn't matter if you worked for a company or you created your own project. If you can show me success, if you can show me what you achieved, that's experience for me. And this is a big one. I think showing what you can do instead of just telling is really big. And a lot of the time when people create their resume, they actually focus on the telling. So I have this certificate, or this was my responsibility, but there isn't too much information about the actual application. So if you can find someone to work for free for, you can create your own project. I mean, if you want to get into digital marketing, build your own website. It's so easy to do that today. Build a website and drive traffic to it. Bonus point, if you do something that can actually be used if you apply for a job later. And here's what I mean. Let's say that you're super excited about a company and you want to get a product marketing role, but you don't really have a lot of experience around market research. So what you would do, let's say the company is Google, then you would go and do market research for a specific product you want to work on at Google. You will look at their competitors, you will look at the industry and the trends that are happening right now. You would gain all of the information and then turn that research into some sort of insight. You need to have a conclusion at the end because that's what you're going to present. And then you can use that project to actually reach out to that company and show them that you did some work that is very specific to them. You gain the experience and you actually earn an opportunity to reach out to that company because let's be honest, applying online today doesn't really work. And we can have a whole conversation about that about later on. So don't be afraid to build your own projects. Just find a company or a product that you really like and create that opportunity for them. Just pretend that you already got the job and do what you would do if you were that product marketing manager, digital marketing manager, whatever it takes. And lastly, if you do have a job right now, if you have an internship, you can use your current job to really gain the experience that you need for your next role. And this is actually something I've done throughout my career. And all it takes is awareness. If you know that you need to gain specific experience, you're gonna find a ton of opportunities around you. And here's what I mean. When you work for a company, you have a job description, but that's just kind of a suggestion. That's just the first step. I've never met a company where people wanted to do more for the same pay and they were told no. So as long as you still do your day job, but you take some extras on, you should be able to create opportunities for yourself. And that means potentially volunteering internally. So let's say I'm in marketing and I want to gain more strategic experience. I can go to the product team and tell them, hey, I'll be more than happy to sit in one of your planning sessions. And in return, I would write your copy for onboarding, something like that. You can kind of trade skills. You would give something you know how to do for the opportunity to gain experience. Let's say you want more leadership experience and you're not a manager right now and you're not going to get the head count in the next year. You can find someone at that company that is more junior than you or wants to have the skills that you have and mentor them. That's a great way to get leadership experience. And if you can make them successful, it's going to reflect back on your ability to be a leader. You can actually go to your manager and just tell them, hey, I actually want to have more experience with X, Y, Z. Can you help me get more tasks that will give me this type of skill? And just to give you an example, when I worked as a VP of marketing at Kolu, I had an employee, I hired her to lead our customer support team. And she was amazing, but she was an individual contributor. And at the time, we were such a small company, only 30 people. I couldn't actually afford to bring someone to report to her. So I couldn't help make her a manager, but that was her dream. She told me, I really want to become a manager. I want to lead a team. But I had this information in my head. So a couple of weeks later, when a few interns were interested in joining us, I immediately told the head of HR, I want one of these interns to go to the customer support team. So it wasn't a full-time role, it was an internship, but she got to actually manage that person. And they actually graduated into a full-time role and she became a manager. And that was about 6 or 7 months after we had that conversation. So yeah, it wasn't immediate, it wasn't perfect. But if she hadn't told me that was her dream, I probably wouldn't have fought so hard to make it happen to her. So if you have a good relationship with your manager, just tell them what you're looking for. Or better yet, tell them you want to help take the load off of them. Ask them to get some of their responsibilities. I did that a lot when I was in Microsoft. I had a great manager. He didn't mind giving me anything I wanted to do, just because he was up to his head with different things he was responsible for. So I got to build quarterly reports, something I've never done before. I got to write some of his keynotes and create content that was published on Forbes and TechCrunch and all kinds of places, just because I volunteered, basically. It wasn't part of my job originally. So as long as you have this list of gaps that you need to fill in, and you keep thinking about finding those opportunities, you will find them, because they're always pretty much around us. But you need to be very intentional in seeking them. Okay, this is the last step, basically, because it's great that we now have an understanding of the gaps we need to fill. But more often than not, when you kind of outline those goals, they're very high level, right? I need to become a leader, or I need more public speaking experience. That's very high level. And if you keep the goals this high level, every time you look at them, you will get discouraged and you'll procrastinate and you will not end up doing them because it's just too big in your head. What you need to do is to dissect those big goals and turn them into very small, bite-sized action items. And let me give you an example. Let's say that you want to get a specific certification. That's a very big task. So if, let's say, I wake up this morning and I look at this task, it just seems daunting. Especially if I'm looking at a certification that takes 3 to 6 months to actually complete. But if you turn this big goal into small actionable tasks like I've done here, it's much easier to actually tackle them. So first and foremost, you need to do some research. You need to understand what's out there. How many vendors are actually selling this certification? Are they all the same? Are some better? You need to look at reviews. You need to have this process for an assessment so you can choose the right certification. So that's a task. You can have another task that says, I choose one of these vendors and then I actually apply. I go through the sign-up process and I complete it. And that can take like 30 to 40 minutes. So that's another task. And lastly, let's say you've already completed registration, but now you need to actually do the work. Then you're going to schedule time on your calendar every single week, let's say 1 hour, where you actually work on gaining that certification. And by taking a very big goal and creating small actionable items, you're much more likely to actually follow through. And what I like doing, and I created a template for that, and it's part of the roadmap, I like to put all of these tasks in this spreadsheet. And then every week I go back to the spreadsheet. I just choose 1 or 2 because I know they each gonna take me about an hour. And I schedule them in my calendar because I actually need to spend time on them. That's basically it. That's the step-by-step process for outlining what you want to do next, understanding what it takes to get there, and then taking the steps to actually gain the skills and gain the experience that you need. It sounds super simple, but most people just go to work every day and kind of wait and hope that something will happen. And that's not a great strategy. All good.
Thank you so much for the informational and inspirational session. I think it's really fascinating how you started off with a different profession and then venture into social media and marketing. Um, yes, and I think dividing our career in terms of these simple tasks, though it sounds really simple, I think when we take charge now, it'll happen over the years. So we'll now open the platform for questions. If you have any questions, you can post them in the chat box or you can raise your hand. We already have one question. Maya, do you want
Yeah,
do
of
you want her
course.
to repeat the question or?
I remember. So yes, I was born in Israel where I spent most of my career. I moved here about 2 years ago. And for me, and I think it was a little bit different maybe than other people just getting started, I already had about a decade of career behind me. And I worked mostly for international companies. So I actually managed teams in the US before, which meant I had relatively a lot of relevant experience to be able to come here and apply for jobs. It wasn't necessarily the easiest process, but for me, it was more about culture differences. I come from a culture that's super open, super direct, in your face, and I really had to kind of tone it down a little bit, learn how to present myself in a way and how to tell my story in a way that makes sense to people here. I know it's not necessarily the answer you wanted to hear, but it's the truth. I just came here with quite a lot of experience, and it made it a little bit easier.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed the webinar.
Oh, thank you.
Even I have a question. So Maya, you must have seen the marketing industry evolve over the years since you worked in it for almost like more than 15 years. I'm sure the industry has evolved over the years. So how do we really keep pace with it? Because, you know, there's something new coming up every month or every year. And as marketers, I think you really need to be hands-on with all the new technologies and new platforms that are coming up. So how do you really keep pace with everything that's coming up as a marketer?
Good question. So I'll answer this in two parts. First and foremost, I think definitely you need to keep yourself up to date. You need to constantly keep learning. And I actually teach you in the book how to do that, how to build a growth machine, which basically means you identify different resources of information. It can be newsletters, YouTube channels, whatever. You do the research to actually identify where the best information is. And you kind of automate the process so that the information comes to you. So you sign up for newsletters or you sign up to get notifications. So you constantly have a stream of information coming into your inbox and kind of forces you to look at it. At least for me, it's really helpful because if I need to go out somewhere, do a Google search, go to a different website to find information, I'm too lazy. I won't do that. So I try to have everything come to me, and then I have 1 hour every week scheduled to look at all the newsletters and the pieces of information that I collected. So that's in general. But when it comes to marketing, I think in the last probably 5 years, there's this craziness around marketing technology. And there are so many platforms, and every day you have something new. I think that it's called the Martech 8,000 right now because there are 8,000 marketing tools. Here's what I can tell you. I don't think tools are as important as the basics of marketing because learning how to use a tool is a lot easier than understanding a customer, than being able to position a product. You need so much more, so many more skills to do that. And you can spend 2 weeks learning about a platform and you'll get it figured out. And you can never win because I know how to use Salesforce, but then I go to a company, oh, we're using Marketo. I'm gonna need to learn it all over again anyway. I wouldn't necessarily spend most of my time on a specific tool unless, one, you're in advertising, because then you really need to understand Facebook, Twitter, maybe LinkedIn right now. So you need to know the platforms well. Or if you're in marketing operations, where the core of your job is to understand those specific tools. Apart from that, you can learn anything. I wouldn't focus on the technology.
Thank you so much.
Cool.
I have a quick question. as a follow-up with the previous question, like you mentioned that you came here with like a good amount of a number of years of experience with a relevant field already. So then could you elaborate more on how to leverage that experience? Because that from like a different market, even though it's like within the international company context, but how would you best like leverage those experience coming to the States?
So because I worked for international companies, I wasn't actually focused on the Israeli market. I almost always worked on the North American market, which again kind of meant that I had that experience. And it wasn't exactly by mistake. Early on, it was just a coincidence, but about 7 years ago when I had that inspiring moment with the perfect picture, I decided that I want to move here. So I started focusing on roles that gave me opportunities to operate in the US. So when I worked for Microsoft, I had a team in Seattle that I managed, and I consistently had to come here. I spent a lot of time in the US and basically already did the work, but I did it remotely because I was still based in Tel Aviv at the time. When I moved to work for Kolu, which is a fintech startup, again, it was a global company. So yes, I worked in the Israeli market, but I also had to launch in Europe, and I also had to launch later on in the US. So I actually got to have that experience. Again, you can't always, like I wanted to move to the US when I worked for Microsoft, and I couldn't get the relocation. It didn't work. It's harder to get relocated as a marketer than it is, let's say, as an engineer. You need to be in the right time, find the right team, and so forth. It's not super easy. So I had to find a different way. But because I knew that was my goal, I focused on getting that experience. I was not supposed to manage the team in Seattle, but I insisted on getting that experience. I volunteered to do different things. I worked with my main target audience when I worked for Microsoft was startups. So I volunteered to become a mentor. But instead of mentoring the startups in Tel Aviv, I volunteered to mentor the startups in Seattle. So again, I got to work with US-based companies. I got to work on the US market and really gain that experience.
Thank you. I think it really goes back to your toolkit, starting with the first step, that is like imagining about what your ideal life would be. So that's why you worked the way through that. Thank you.
And to be honest, look, I know, you probably can't wait 7 years right now. You want to have the ability to come and work here. So what I would say is leverage what you have that other people don't have. And here's what I mean. A lot of people, like I mentioned before, they kind of spray and pray. So they think the more resumes they'll send, the more jobs they're going to get. The truth is exactly the opposite. Because just to give you kind of high level numbers, if you want a job at Google, for every role, they probably get anywhere between 250 to 1,000 applications, and it's a huge pile. And they have this pile of people who submitted their application online, and they have this pile that says referrals, and that pile only have 50 resumes on it. Where do you think a recruiter will start? They will start with a referral pile. So I think what you can probably do is build that network, find the referrals, and do what no one else is doing. Build a project, do something unique for that company to gain their attention, instead of just applying online and trying to beat the ATS, which is kind of a losing battle anyway. I mean, if you send enough resumes, you'll probably get an interview or two, but it's just not, I don't know, I don't think this is the way to do it right now. I got my job at Microsoft and Google through referrals. I never actually applied. I got to be the VP of marketing for Kolu by a referral, not through applying online. And I think some of the best opportunities are gained that way. And I'm more than happy to kind of walk you through a more specific way to do that if you're interested. You can also follow Austin Belsack on LinkedIn. He's amazing. And he has a step-by-step guide on how to do that.
Even I have a question. So most of us are graduate students, who are looking to build their profiles online. And I've seen you're very active on LinkedIn. You keep posting your opinions. So how do we really make a difference on these digital platforms? How do we really stand out and use LinkedIn to our advantage, especially in today's world, considering the pandemic where everyone's working remotely and most of our job applications will be done online. So how do we really stand out?
I think you probably have two different routes you can take. If you feel confident enough, if you're not, if you feel like you can be the face and you don't mind creating content, then you can just tell your own story. You don't necessarily have to be an influencer in the way that you teach other people. You don't need to have a ton of experience. You can just share what you're going through. And I saw someone who just started an internship. I think it's at an Airbnb about 3 or 4 weeks ago. And every week he shares an update about the internship, what he learned, what he was doing, what's working, what's not working. That's amazing because it actually teaches other people something. So if you're comfortable doing that, just share your own story. If maybe you don't want to be front and center, what you can do is have a lot of meaningful engagements. So go and comment on other people's posts, but don't just say, oh, great content, thank you. But really engage, really share your feedback, give your spin on what they were saying, ask them a question, have a meaningful conversation. I have a lot of people who's done that with my content, and it resulted in having a conversation because I already knew who they were and I remembered their name and I knew that they were very thoughtful and they actually took the time to listen and to comment to what I was saying. So I was more than happy to give them the time and spend 30 minutes with them or look at their resume or do something for them. And you don't need to do it with like 30 people, but if you choose 10 that are relevant to you, you can start to build those relationships.
Thank you so much. So we have one question in the chat box. Maeve posted it. So she's asking, do you have any suggestions in terms of how to propose to someone that we admire to be mentors? Like, does a mentorship always have to be formal? Can it be informal in any way?
Well, I would say never ask someone to be your mentor. There's a huge difference between mentorship and coaching, and I think people sometimes get it confused. For me, at least, mentorship is based on a relationship. It's not a transactional relationship. It's a very friendly relationship. So anyone who's been a mentor in my life started as a friend first. It doesn't start with, hey, I want you to mentor me. Here are 5 of my problems. It just, I can tell you as someone who's had a lot of requests coming in of, hey, can you be my mentor? It automatically makes me want to take a step back because it feels like a lot of work and too much of a demand when I don't know you. So my suggestion is to do exactly what I said before. Start by building a relationship. If you can, start by adding value. Here are a few super simple tips. You don't need to have a ton of experience to add value. I do this all the time. Every time I find someone like an influencer that I want to talk to, I go to their website and I go through the website, every single page, every button, I click everything because 99% of the time I will find something that's broken. And if something is broken, that's a great excuse to go back and say, hey, I'm a huge fan, just visited your website. I tried to download your toolkit and I'm using Chrome and it didn't work. You may want to fix that. I've done that so many times and I always hear back, like 100% of the time, because you're actually helping someone else. So that's one thing that you can do. You can send out a message and talk to people about how they influenced you or how something they said actually not only resonated, but show them that you did something with it. You actually took the first step. So I had someone reach out to me recently and say, hey, I downloaded your toolkit and I already started applying, some of your suggestions. And I actually have an interview coming up because I was more focused and, I looked for the right company. And then they asked me a couple of questions and I was more than happy to help because it was within a very specific context. So I think you shouldn't just reach out to people and ask them to be your mentor. It should be more of a relationship. And the more you kind of build that trust, you can kind of go back and forth and ask for help. If you need help with something specific, you can find a coach. But a coach will probably charge you for that relationship because that's what they do. That's their job. And that's perfectly fine. If you have a very specific problem you want to solve right now, you can find an expert and, you know, pay them and get the opinion, you know, get their feedback so you can actually improve.
One more question. So you've also recently turned into an author and you've written your own book. But have there been any other books that have inspired you while you were a professional, or any other books that we can refer to you know, really know how to draw a career roadmap?
Yeah, 100% the book Mindset by Carol Dweck. That's probably the one that changed my life the most. I read it, I think it was when I was at Microsoft. And it changed my perspective on how the world works and what I can and can't achieve. It just gave me an understanding that I'm in control, and I, you know, maybe I'm not there right now, but I can always grow and improve and learn and get to where I want to go. And I think it's important to actually believe you can do it before you start taking actions, because if you don't believe it, you'll never actually get there. So that was a really great book. I think Never Split the Difference. Don't remember the name of the author. Amazing book to have for life. It's a book about negotiating, but it's mostly about human psychology. So as a marketer, I was fascinated. You can kind of trick people into doing things in a good way just because you use different words or a different tone, which is pretty exciting. So I would definitely recommend that to anyone.
Thank you. Also, where can we grab a copy of your book?
So the book is coming out September 15th. And if you go to mayagrossman.com, you'll have all the information. You can actually download the first chapter for free. And the first chapter is all about developing an owner's mindset. And I think that's one of the most important tools to build yourself as an invaluable employee. That ability to not only think about yourself and your own role, but actually look at the bigger picture and optimize for what's right for the company, not just what's right for you.
Thank you so much. Do we have any more questions?
Happy to answer anything.
You can post them in the chat box. You can raise your hand.
What is, I'm actually, I have a question for you. What is the biggest challenge you're facing right now as someone who's about to kind of, I don't know, if start their career or take the second stage in their career? I'm just wondering, what's the biggest challenge?
I think considering the pandemic, because a lot of us are feeling challenged considering that, you know, the economy is down and it'll take time to settle and come back. So because most of us are international students and need visa sponsorship. So I think that's one of the biggest challenges all of us are facing in terms of, you know, getting jobs, in terms of networking and reaching out to people. And because everything's going to turn digital, everybody started working remotely. So you don't really have that personal touch or that personal interaction with people anymore. So I think that's the biggest challenge, at least I'm facing, is how do I really reach out to people? Will there be companies willing to hire me or sponsor visa for me? So I think that's the biggest challenge I'm facing right now.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's definitely a challenge with what's happening with visas right now, unfortunately. The advice I can give on standing out and actually having that opportunity, because if you need sponsorship, it's going to take more out of the company than to hire someone who's already here. I think the only thing you can probably do is showcase your value in a better way. So don't rely on a resume. I think it was a couple of years back, someone told me, you know what, you should create a portfolio. And I was like, what do you mean portfolio? I'm a marketer. You know, designers have a portfolio. what am I going to create? But I started researching it, and apparently you can create a marketing portfolio, which is basically an extension of your resume, but it's a more visual way to explain your impact. So let's say if I wanted to show that I'm great at social media, yeah, I can write in my resume that I built a page and it reached 1 million people, which is great. But when you show screenshots and you show the numbers and you show the engagement, people get a better feel of who you are. So to this day, I actually have a portfolio. And even as a VP marketing, sometimes it's a better way to show people what I'm capable of. And if you can build it online, if you can maybe have like a Wix website that shows everything instead of sending a file that usually gets stuck in junk mail, then do that. It's super impressive. And it sets you apart. But I would highly recommend that you actually think about creating a project. Let me give you an example. So a couple of years back, I was interviewing for a startup and I really liked them. I really liked the product. And I was like, this is perfect for me. I'm gonna be, the best fit for them. I had 2 interviews, one with the CEO, one with the head of sales. And they got back to me and said, we think we're gonna talk to someone else. And I was so upset because I knew I was going to be good for this role. So I did not get discouraged. What I realized, I looked back at those interviews and I realized I didn't do a good enough job to explain why I was right and what I was capable of doing before. So I did what I would have done if I got the job. I actually built a strategy for them, like 6, 7, 8 slides, I don't remember. I did the work. I spent 4 days, heads down, just learning about the company, getting any information I could get publicly, and I put together a strategy. And I sent it to them and I said, hey, I know you said no. That's fine. I don't think I did a good enough job showing you who I am. So here's a better example. If you still think I'm not the right fit, not a problem. If you think this is interesting, let's have a conversation. 3 days later, I already had an on-site with them because I was able to show them what I'm capable of, and I actually took the time. Especially if you're looking at smaller companies, they want people who get the job done. The fact that I spent my own time creating that was very impressive to them. They actually told me no one has ever done that for us. But you can do that. It's not that hard. It's just time, and you have time. So spend time creating something specifically for that company and show them what you can do. And again, this is a great way to start a conversation because let's say I didn't have that interview, but I built a strategy anyway, okay? I would then go to LinkedIn and I will try and find, not the hiring manager, but I would try and find team members and reach out to them and say, hey, I love your company and what you're doing. And, I would love to be part of the team, and here's something that I created. Well, maybe that's not the right approach. You can probably find someone and say, hey, I'm an aspiring digital marketer and I created a campaign for you. And I've actually ran it online because you can get free credits from Google and Facebook. You can probably get like $100. So you can actually run a campaign and get back to them and show them the results and say, hey, I've been running this campaign for you guys. I think you may want to take a look. I'm happy to walk you through it so you can build something similar. And just like that, you gave them value. They want to talk to you. And if you'll have a great conversation, that person will refer you to the job you want. So the more specific you are, so if you choose 5 to 10 companies and you go deep and you create those projects, it's going to set you apart from anyone else. It's going to make a huge difference. So if I had to start right now and, if I had to get that visa, if I had to get that sponsorship, this is how I would stand out.
Yeah, like you said, even though the application might be online, maybe work on a project that you've been probably reading about the company or build your own portfolio. So yeah, we need to stand out and not do a normal regular application online.
And here's the thing, I'm going to be very upfront right now. most companies probably don't want to sponsor someone if they can get someone locally, because it's more time, more money, it's more challenging, unless you make them fall in love with you before they know they have to do it. And this is the perfect way to do it.
Thank you so much. So do we have any more questions?
Oh, yeah, actually, I have a question. I'm not sure if you guys can hear me.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah,
Okay. So, because I've recently applied to jobs, but given the conditions right now, it's very tough because I have several years of work experience before I returned to grad school. So, I graduated back in December, so I'm able to compare the situation, from now with back then. But after several months of submitting resumes, I can tell now that the condition is really getting worse. So I've decided to start my own marketing consultancy company. So my question is, if I were to start a company, I put that my startup experience on my resume or on my LinkedIn, would you think would that add some harm to my future or my potential job search? Let's say when a recruiter reach out to me to see, oh, this guy is actually working for himself. Do you think that will cause some sort of conflicts for, with potential employers?
I definitely can't speak for everyone. I can speak for myself. I would actually find it an advantage, because not only you know how to do the job, because you'll have more case studies and examples of how you actually apply it, but you know how to run a business. So
Right.
you would be a much better asset for me, because you would understand how the whole thing works, and you won't just be focused on marketing. And to be honest, this is what I'm doing right now. I spent the last 2 years as a consultant. And if I'm being honest, I don't ever remember having so many people reaching out to me about full-time roles. But here's the caveat. You can't just say you have an agency. You need to have real experience, and you need to be able to show success.
Right. Got you. Thank you so much.
Sure. I think I told you before that I will come back to startups. So if you want to do work for free, or if you want to get more experience, I think you can have a better chance trying to do some free work for really early stage startups. So I'm talking about companies that have like 10, maybe 15 people, but they are hard to find. How do you find them? So you go to a website called crunchbase.com, which is basically a repository of all the different companies and their funding rounds. And you can filter it to look for companies who only raise their seed funding, which means they're really small. And you can filter it for a specific location, New York, San Francisco, and what's not. And you're gonna get a list of really small companies, but those that actually raise some funding, so they're not, completely out there. There's some money behind what they're doing. And you can just usually reach out to them directly. Just find a CEO and see if you can actually talk to them, because those companies usually do not have anyone to do marketing for them, and they would kill to have someone to do free work, 100%. So that's an interesting way to get some experience. And just to kind of, okay, I can't believe I'm sharing this, but about a year ago, I needed some more clients as a consultant. So I found, well, it's not found, but there's this startup accelerator, which is basically a place where startups go to get access to mentors and information. It's a program they join for like 3 months, and it really helps accelerate their growth. So there's an accelerator called Y Combinator. It's basically the best accelerator in the world. Companies like Airbnb were actually started there. And I kind of found my way into their internal website, and I posted there to say, hey, I'm a marketing consultant. I'm gonna give you the first hour for free. And I got 46 startups to sign up. So startups really, really, really want marketing support. And if you do a good enough job, there's a good chance that they will actually hire you. So just be creative. You don't have to go for the Googles of the world. You can find smaller companies in a niche that interests you and kind of build your career from there. Even if it's just for a while, even if you're doing it for free, it doesn't matter, because at the end, let's say you do volunteer, right? And you do a work for free for 3 months, but you have results. When you put that on your resume, you don't say I volunteered, you say I did consulting. No one needs to know that you weren't paid for that job, because technically you were consulting. Okay, and that's how you get that experience. The important part though is that you don't just go and do more of the same, because if you get more experience like what you already have, it's not going to help you. You need to go into that company with your list of gaps that you need to fill, and you need to figure out how you actually get hands-on experience with those specific skills.
Do we have any more questions? Any comments? How did you guys like the session?
Hi, I have a question.
Yeah.
I want to go back to the point where you said about the portfolio, creating a portfolio. I'll just give you a little bit of my background that I'm a hospitality undergrad student, and then I worked in hospitality for 2 years. I got interested in marketing and got an NYU for integrated marketing. So I'm a grad student here. When you say creating a portfolio, is it necessary that it should be something which you have done on your own, or can it be related to your coursework? Because in my coursework, we had done a lot of real world projects, but it wasn't something which went live. But yeah, we did make a lot of campaigns. So can it be something like that, or should it be like completely on my own, something like that?
The campaigns you created, were they for real companies?
Yeah.
Definitely yes.
Okay.
I mean, make sure that it says somewhere that you didn't work directly for that company. But if you created a project and you have results to show for, of course use it. It's kind of like me using the free consulting work that I did. Yeah, it was free,
Right.
but I still did my job and got the results.
Right. Okay. Thank you so much.
Of course. You got to use anything that and everything that you have. And it's harder when you're just getting started because you don't have a ton of experience. This is why I'm saying create your own things, create your own opportunities. If you, like I said, if you can run an online campaign, even with $100 and get results, that's amazing. You can showcase that. You can show, you know, I drove X amount of traffic to a website and this was the conversion rate. It looks so much better than to say, yeah, I have a certificate, you know, to do Google advertising. Great. I don't know if you're good or not, so I can't actually evaluate you.
Thank you. Do we have any more questions?
Hi, Maya. I have a question right now. Okay, I'm gonna open my camera as well. So, actually, I work as a marketing project manager, but I just graduated as well. Like, I work at a tech company, and I'm wondering, you know, because the company is located at Dallas, but I prefer East Coast. So when you change your job, like what kind of elements you were considered about, and you think those things are important to you, and we need to keep that in my mind. Yeah.
Yeah. When I look for a job, I mostly look for an opportunity to learn something new. So I want to be excited about it, and I want to know that it's going to be a little bit different than what I've done. So every time I moved up in my career, I took a job that I was probably 70% ready to take. But I trusted myself enough to know that the extra 30, I'm going to figure it out. And I think that's what you should aim for, because at least for me, that's a lot of the fun, to actually learn something new, to stretch myself, to put myself out of my comfort zone. This is basically how you grow. If you take the same roles one after another, you don't actually get to do that. You just kind of do more of the same. Now, if you want to be an expert in a very specific field, sometimes you need to do that because you need to go very deep as opposed to wide. For me, every time I got a little taste of marketing, I wanted more. So I started in social media, but that wasn't enough. So I moved into digital marketing, but that didn't feel like enough. So I kind of moved into product marketing. And now I can look back and say, you know what? It was actually really good for me because I'm in leadership roles now and I understand how every part of marketing works. And it makes it easier for me to build a strategy. It makes it easier for me to manage a team because I know exactly what they need to do. But that's not right for everyone. Some people want to become, experts. I know people who are experts in advertising and they are so good at what they do that they basically have companies running after them, throwing money at them just so that they would come and work for them. So it really depends on what you love doing. But that's my main criteria. Everything else for me is usually secondary. I don't like commuting. I hate driving. So I will definitely try and stay away from that. But if it's the right company and the right role, I would go anywhere. So I don't, I'll make it work.
I see. Yeah.
Yeah. Sure.
So thank you so much. I think that's a wrap. Maya, I would like to thank you from the entire team of IMA. Thank you for flagging off. This was our first event for the new academic year, and it's great. It has been a great session. Thank you for all the inspiration, for breaking down how to make a career roadmap into different tasks. You've given us a lot of insights and a lot of knowledge, which I don't think we would have received otherwise. So thank you so much. Thank you all for attending this event. We are going to be posting the recording on our YouTube page where you can access it. You all can connect or follow Maya on LinkedIn. She's very active. She keeps putting great content on LinkedIn. Maya, do you want to give any closing thoughts?
No, just thank you so much for having me. And hopefully this was, valuable for you and it's going to give you a few ideas how you want to move to your next step. And like you mentioned, feel free to reach out on LinkedIn. I do try to get back to everyone, although it takes time, so please be patient. And go ahead and download the toolkit, download the first chapter of the book. And if you have any questions, just let me know.
Thank you so much. Stay safe, all of y'all. Head to our YouTube page for the event. Thank you so much, Maya.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, everyone.